Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Evan from Epic Duel Time. I'll be doing the commentary for this duel by myself for this one. We had Derek and Tim earlier, and we recorded the whole thing, and none of it sounded good, so I'm doing it again. We have Tim playing Dino Rabbits and Dan playing Removal Chaos. Dan's Removal Chaos revolves around this play that you can see right here. It's Cyber Valley and Machine Duplication. Cyber Valley being under 500 points is allowed to be machine duped, and duplication will just summon 2 more Cyber Valleys. Cyber Valley has 3 amazing effects. 1 to banish itself when it's attacked, 1 to banish itself and another monster you control, to draw 2 cards, as you just see what he did there, and then a third one that you'll see later involving banishing a card from his hand, to take any card in his graveyard and put it on the top of his deck. And so Tim's studying up on his Cyber Valley. It's a card that is rarely seen in the meta, if ever. The last time we really heard from Removal Chaos was Courtney Waller winning YCS Kansas with the deck, but this is a completely different build, and in my humble opinion, I think it's, I like Dan's a little bit better because I think there's a lot more consistency across the board. And especially where Dino Rabbits are sitting on, on the top of the hill alongside Chaos Dragons, being able to sit behind a Cyber Valley to prepare for your plays is really a strong ability. Also, Dan's build allows him to hold very consistent hand advantage. So Tim brings out a Sabersaurus. You can see from his hand, if you look closely enough, he didn't draw too well. He got 2 Sabersaurus and a Guaiba, and having played Dino Rabbits myself, I know that it's a hard fight to get out of that because you're sitting with no effect beaters, and so you have to work out of that play. And this is why Dino Rabbit does take skill, because you need to know how to play out of these hands. And Tim does so very well. He uses the Soul Taker card, which destroys a face-up monster of Tim's choice, and then gives his opponent 1,000 life points. The cards are very popular right now. Picked up a lot of pace and seen a lot of play among top-ranked duelists like Billy Brake and Joji Orlando. And there's a lot of information about it if you're looking for, tips and tricks on why the card's so talked about. And so we see a Dimensional Alchemist. Of course, his effect allows you to banish the top card of your deck to gain 500 points. Dimensional Alchemist also, when he's destroyed, is allowed to give you any monster from your banished zone back to your hand. This allows him to reuse cards like Cyber Valley and Battle Fader long after they've banished themselves. We'll also have a deck list for Dan's deck posted on Epic Duel Time, and we'll have a link to his channel as well. Take a look. Really, if you'd like, you could just take a break right now from watching this duel, check out his deck, and see what exactly he has in store. It's really interesting. I didn't know. I actually am not in the video, but I'm watching what's going on while it's being filmed, and surprise after surprise with Dan Allen's plays. They're really interesting. And he attempts to really create as much consistency as he can with a deck not known for being consistent, but he's found a way to do so. And I think any ounce of originality in this awkward format is really, I think it's really nice to see. So Tim's attacked, and the Battle Fader is inevitable. Whether or not you attack, it doesn't matter. You can't bait that out. He could have gone to an early Dolka, but that direct attack wouldn't have happened. And with 2 background, I don't think going into a quick Dolka like that's possible. But right now he's going to go, he's going to overlay, and he has a choice. And this is where also, when you're not just summoning Rabbit and setting back row, this is where Dino Rabbits take. You have to be able to guess your opponent's plays. Where Dan is not playing a mainstream meta deck, it is harder for Tim to figure out which one to go into. Laggy is a one-trick pony, and it can be baited out very easily. Dolka is a glass cannon, really. He's an amazing effect. but if it can be baited out with something as quick as a Smash and Ground or a Soul Taker, it wasn't worth going into it. So you have to make that hard choice, and Tim's going to trust that Dolka can do the job. And he's sitting in back row. It's common, you're not going to see too many players not set back row to help out their Dolkas unless they're up against Insectors, but Dan sees it, and he MSTs it. And so this is a really interesting play when I had first seen it. Dan takes Evolzar Dolka using Mind Control, and then he summons Torgai, which would have been negated by the Dolka. But he takes the Dolka for an even higher purpose. This is going to help explain one of how easily it is to utilize, easy it is to utilize Cyber Valley. He brings out Levier, and then gets Cyber Valley. Cyber Valley's effect banishes 2 monsters, and he gets to draw 2. So he's banishing Tim's Dolka that he got off Mind Control. He gets rid of a major threat and a big play on the board by allowing himself to get rid of it and plus off of it. This is Return from the Different Dimension. This is one of Dan's ace cards. It summons back as many banished monsters as possible. And he has 2 Cyber Valleys. Of course, he does have to pay half his life points. It's a steep cost, but as you see with the field that he has right now, it's worth it. He's going to use Cyber Valley's 3rd effect. It allows him to banish a card in his hand and a card from the field, in the Cyber Valley. And then he puts any card in his graveyard on the top of his deck. The card that he's going to choose ends up being Return from the Different Dimension. And so he can keep reusing it. And then he's going to use Cyber Valley's 2nd effect with the Battle Fader. This double utilizes Battle Fader. Battle Fader is going to banish himself anyway. So he uses Cyber Valley to force banish him and get those cards. It's playing the smart game. It really is playing the smart game with a deck that isn't a meta deck. But he finds a way to really make these plays. And because they're not easy to guess, it does mimic the way Plants had all of their combos. That Dan will also have with his removal, all of his combos. And Tim does a quick MST, spots the Return from the Different Dimension. And now there's just a Levier on the field to deal with. Dan has taken his life points fairly low with that return. But again, to make the plays, you have to make some sacrifices for it. He's set up so that he can get a Blackluster in 2 turns. Or, a little over 1 turn. And the players are trying to get their bearings on where the duel stands, and with Tim in control of 2 Sabersaurus, and now Tim's going to Monster Reborn and bring back his Guaiba. Together, these 3 monsters do equal game if Dan's back row cannot save him. And Tim and Dan will calculate the life and explain that it ends up being game. So now we have game 2. Dan does open up Cyber Valley and Machine Duplication again. And of course, this allows him to special summon 2 more Cyber Valleys from the deck. And I can't stress it enough, do watch his deck profile, it's fantastic. He talks about all the potential plays that each card in his deck makes, and every card of his deck has at least 1 to 2 purposes, if not more. And so Dan plays Gold Sarcophagus. This is a card to speed things up a little bit, and he's picked Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning. Because it's a Chaos deck, all the Chaos monsters apply. Cyber Valley is a very tough monster to get past, because of its effect to be able to negate, to be able to end the battle phase, and be able to draw the card. You don't want your opponent, you don't want to lose the battle phase, and you especially don't want to let your opponent draw any more than they already are, because they're sitting there making plays off Cyber Valleys left and right. He's also essentially Gwaiba's worst nightmare. A tour guide summoned, and Dan Valor's, again, Chaos, light and dark. Valor's bound to be seen in it, because Dan's not running some sort of a macro build that allows him to completely utilize all of Chaos's best strengths. Hand traps, whatever he needs. And Dan will also summon his tour guide. This is a great play made by Tim. He's going to use Macrocosmos, which, if anybody can see what's coming next, tour guide. He's trying to avoid him from summoning Sangan, but he does have the Torrential to follow up. He accidentally flipped a Dimensional Prison, you can see. So that does tell Dan what the rest of the back row looks like. But in this case, it's going to solve the problem of Cyber Valley, keep him from searching off the Sangan, and make that tour guide a complete waste. And Dan's just going to throw down a Gold Sarcophagus, banish more. Keep in mind that Macrocosmos does not directly hurt Dan, because most of his targets can come back. He can bring them back with Dimensional Alchemist, Leviaire, or Return from the Different Dimension. So they're just as dangerous in the banish zone as they are in his hand. Tim summons a Gwaiba, puts in 17, and if we didn't catch this earlier, but Dan did use Gold Sarcophagus to get an MST. That's clearly going to be for the Macrocosmos, just so he can make some future plays. And it's been 2 turns, so Blackluster Soldier's ready. Obviously, in a field of 3 back row, it's not the opportune time to be able to play that Blackluster, but a Thunder King Ryo comes out. Dan's gonna use Smashing Ground. That's his option. A lot of players found that Smashing Ground's just as good for them as Soul Taker. Keep in mind that Soul Taker is really only as good as being able to use it against Elemental Hero the Shining or Light Pulsar Dragon. Dan did take a moment just to verify Gwaiba's defense. A lot of players don't, when an opponent or they book of Moon a card, they don't remember its defense points. That's really important to take note of that. You don't want to be attacking into something that you forgot his defense points for. Tim flips the Gwaiba, and he attacks with Thunder King, clearly displaying that he has a Forbidden Lance in his hand. He's going to drop the Lance during the damage step. Dan will chain in the damage step and use his Forbidden Lance, bringing Gwaiba down by 200. And that'll be the first damage against him. Forbidden Lance is a very tricky card, and you have to be able to use the Light right. In this case, both players had it available to them, so the monster with the highest attack points still wins. And it's hard for Tim because he's invested a Gwaiba and his Forbidden Lance into a play, while Dan only had to invest the Forbidden Lance. And all these monsters end up being banished. And all the cards, in fact, are banished. Gwaiba is a fantastic card, but the problem with him is that he almost completely relies on using Forbidden Lance as his power card. In this case, right now, Dan was able to get back his Mystical Space Typhoon. It is known to Dan that the face-down card is Dimensional Prison. Tim has a choice. If Dan attacks, he has to be willing to either play under Thunder King's restrictions or be able to allow, or eventually destroy Dimensional Alchemist and allow him to have a card in his hand. Dan has already banished, in the corner if you can see, he has banished a Gores, the Emissary of Darkness, and another Mystical Space Typhoon. So he doesn't direct attack with Dimensional Alchemist. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to see which card Tim is going to try to banish. And it depends on what's in Tim's hand. Tim's not ready for him to have a card from the banish zone in his hand again, because that would mean a free Gores. So Dan gets the attack with Thunder King. It's risky to leave a monster under, to leave yourself and your monsters under Thunder King. Thunder King's he's a big beater. He's 19. He's light, which means that he's viable to have Honest protecting him. And he's also has the searching restrictions and the ability to negate inherent special summons. All in all, Thunder King has earned his reputation as a very feared defensive opening play, but also a feared beatstick throughout the game. He's tough to get over, he's tough to get around. And Tim's going to use Soul Taker once again. This gives Dan another 1,000 life points, taken away quickly by Guaiba. And Dan summons a Dimensional Alchemist. And he attacks Tim and kills the Guaiba, dealing 100. Tim normals his Sabersaurus. And now that Alchemist is down, his attack points to 13, Sabersaurus easily gets over it, and Dan will add a monster to his hand. It is Gores, the Emissary of Darkness. Dan uses Smashing Ground to clear out the Sabersaurus. Then he activates a Monster Reborn, targeting his Thunder King Ryo. Tim negates the activation of Monster Reborn. Dan summons Tour Guide without having any targets available to him. He chooses to just attack for 1,000, bringing Tim back down to 1,000 life points, and Dan's still sitting on 5,000. Tim brings out Sabersaurus, dealing a 900 over the Tour Guide. And Dan banishes a Light in the Dark, getting Blackluster Soldier, but Tim has his response using the Torrential Tribute he had set. With Tim with one back row. Dan just fixing his banish zone. Dan passes turn. Valor's a Tour Guide. Summons Gores. And there's nowhere else that can go for the rest of the duel. So that's game 2 in Dan's favor. Game 3. And again, that really does show Dimensional Alchemist's versatility of being able to get Gores out and then put Gores back in your hand. Gores is a power card. He's never something you really want you to have, be up against. At 2,700, being able to be summoned off of attacks. He's one of the better, if not one of the best cards in the game. And Dan does a fantastic blind MST, hitting a Macrocosmos. I'm sure he was pleased with it. Summons a Tour Guide, gets the same again. conducts an overlay to get Levier. Dan makes a bit of a mistake here, and it happens. He played his gold sark a little too quickly, and it did tell Tim where he was going with the rest of the play. Obviously, he was going. It was very clear to play the gold sark, but it did show 100% he was going to do a gold sark play. This changes now that the Torrentials destroyed the Levier. It changes Dan's course of action. You can see right in Dan's hand, he's currently holding a Gores. If you can also see, he was also holding an Honest. Using his own deck box as a token, why not? Remember that the token's light. It's level 7, the exact same attack points as Sabersaurus. He declares the attack, and then drops Honest. Again, Dan's using every possible card that's available to Chaos. And then pushing in 27 on the Gores. It's a lot of life points to be lost, especially to a Gores. Gores is a very big card, and he's a game changer, and he turns the tides of a game very quickly. Also one of my favorite cards for just always have the tendency to draw him at the right time, and never a time that worries in my hand that I don't appreciate having him. It's a great card for a reason. So Tim now has a 19 light token and a 27 Gores to handle him. None of the three of these games has Tim been able to successfully summon a Rescue Rabbit, so please do note that he's really drawing quite poorly, and he has to deal with quite a lot of challenges that Dino Rabbits do. And this does go to show that Dino Rabbit isn't an autoplay deck. It's a deck that requires a lot of planning and thinking when you have to deal with the hands that are not ideal. If you're not opening Rabbit, or the Rabbit summon isn't successful, or the effect never worked, there's a lot of challenges you run into. So, next time you lose to a Dino Rabbit player, then I don't think that the next words should be, well, that deck takes no skill. It does actually take quite a bit of thinking and being able to play and read your opponent's cards and figure out what it is that you want to do and what plays you need to make to win the game when the hand you got was not ideal. Many times I've opened 2 to 3 of the normal monsters, and you have to work with that. You don't have a choice. There is no mulligan in this game. So he summons Utopia, which is a safe choice when you're trying to fight off Gores. There is no rank 4 that's bigger than Gores. Gemnet Pearl's only 26. And so he uses Utopia. That'll buy him some time. And so the player's trying to calculate some life. Keep in mind that Utopia now is able to become the Utopia Ray by just placing it on it, being able to save him after he's out of materials, and keeping a valid monster on the field. Utopia Ray's effect, if you're under 1,000, if you're 1,000 or lower, is also an amazing effect if you ever get a chance to use it. And it is an absolute game-changing effect if you're under 1,000. At this point, Dan doesn't seem to have a whole ton of options available to him to be able to take down the Utopia. And so, in battles like this, it just becomes attacking the Utopia to try to get it to drop materials. So that by the time you're ready for your play, the Utopia is ready to be off the field, and by then, you're ready to make your push for game. Attacks the Utopia, keeps the Honest attached. Dan sets 1 back row, 1 monster. throws in another attack. Ends his turn, passes to Tim. At this point, if it were me, and I'm not sure that Tim is actually running the card, I would overlay the Utopia into the Utopia array, which you can still do. Utopia does not need to have all of his materials for you to play Utopia array. You can play Utopia array on an empty Utopia. It would allow you to be able to not, when the attack is declared, Utopia kills itself out of its own effect. And then a replay occurs allowing a direct attack. So when you're playing Utopia, you can simply just have the Utopia array on it, and if anything, play it in defense mode just to not, if you get attacked, to not have it kill itself and then have a direct attack. So Tim, the only thing you really can do at this point is Grand Mole that Gores off the field. Yes, Gores is back in the hand, but he can still, play, tug of war with the Gores. Utopia destroys a Dimensional Alchemist, however, nothing's been banished on Dan's side. And Dan is able to bring out a Blackluster Soldier. And the best thing Tim could do was to negate that summon. Really, it is the best play for that moment. So, Tim uses Monster Reborn, targets Leviair for the beater. Normal summons Thunder King, attacks with Thunder King, and then he would have game by just simply attacking directly. And that's where I believe that the Utopia array would have been the best way to go. But, happens, and that's the duel. Dan wins 2-1, and hope you enjoyed it. Please check out Dan's deck list. It's really something to watch, and he explains it very well. Great deck. And hope you enjoy it. Please comment, subscribe, like our videos. Let us know how we're doing. And keep dueling, America.
Card of the Week brought to you by Honest. Did somebody say Honest?
Your card of the week is Cyber Valley. A light, level 1 machine with 0 attack and 0 defense. This tricky monster uses its banishing effects to generate advantage to its controller. It reads, you can use one of these effects. When this card is targeted for an attack by an opponent's monster, you can banish this card, draw 1 card, and then end the battle phase. You can target one face-up monster you control and this card, banish both that target and this card, and then draw 2 cards. You can target 1 card in your graveyard, banish this card and 1 card from your hand, then place that target on top of your deck. As you saw in this duel video, Dan used all 3 of these effects to be able to either avoid being attacked, generate card advantage by using Leviair, stealing his opponent's monster and then banishing it, or simply being able to put return from the different dimension back on the top of his deck. Utilizing these 3 effects can seriously generate a ton of advantage to the controller of the card. And that's your card for the week. Brought to you by Honest. Did somebody say Honest?
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We host new videos every week. Stay tuned for more decks, duels, news, and reviews. And as always, keep dueling, America.